I always believed our marriage was a fortress, unyielding against the storms of life. Clara and I had built something rare, 20 years of shared laughter, quiet mornings with coffee, and dreams woven into the fabric of our suburban home. I'm Daniel, a structural engineer, grounded in logic, designing bridges that withstand time. Clara, an art curator, brought color to my grayscale world. Her smile could unravel my sternest days, and her touch was a language only I understood. We had no children, a choice we made to savor each other's company, to travel, to chase passions. Our life felt complete, a perfect blueprint. But perfection is a lie. I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface, subtle as hairline fractures in concrete. It started with her late nights at the gallery. "A new exhibit," she'd say, her eyes bright but distant. I trusted her implicitly. Why wouldn't I? She was my compass, my North Star. Yet, the air in our home shifted. Her laughter grew sparse, her touch mechanical. I chalked it up to stress, to the demands of her career. I was busy too, calculating load-bearing capacities, ensuring bridges wouldn't collapse. Irony, isn't it? I was so focused on preventing disasters in steel and stone that I missed the one brewing in my own heart. One evening, I found her phone unattended, buzzing with a notification. I'm not the snooping type, trust was our foundation, but curiosity nudged me. The message was from Julian, her gallery assistant. "Can't wait for Paris. Just us." My stomach twisted. Paris? She hadn't mentioned a trip. I scrolled further, my pulse hammering. Messages, dozens of them, intimate in tone, laced with a familiarity that wasn't mine. "You make me feel alive," she'd written. My Clara, my wife, was pouring her soul into someone else. I sat there, the phone trembling in my hand, as the world I'd built tilted off its axis. I didn't confront her that night. I needed proof, not just words on a screen. Logic, my old friend, demanded evidence. I became a shadow in my own life, watching her movements, noting her excuses. She was radiant, glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years, and it wasn't for me. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a theft of the life we'd promised each other. Julian, with his tousled hair and pretentious scarves, was no stranger. I'd met him at gallery events, shaken his hand, laughed at his jokes. He was real flesh and blood, not some abstract rival. The thought of them together gnawed at me, a slow poison. I began to plan, not out of anger but necessity. If our marriage was a bridge, it was collapsing, and I needed to control the demolition. Revenge, I decided, wouldn't be impulsive. It would be precise, calculated, a force as unyielding as gravity. I didn't know yet what form it would take, but it would be cruel, not in violence, but in truth. Clara and Julian would face the weight of their choices, and I'd ensure they carried it forever. For now, I played the devoted husband, smiling through the pain, laying the foundation for what was to come. The days after discovering Clara's betrayal were a masterclass in deception. Not hers, but mine. I woke each morning, kissed her forehead, and brewed her coffee, all while my heart churned like a storm-battered sea. She'd smile, oblivious to the fact that I knew, her eyes skimming over me like I was furniture. It was surreal, living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. I'd always prided myself on reading people, on understanding the stresses that could fracture a structure or a soul. But Clara? She was a puzzle I'd stopped solving, assuming the pieces were fixed. I started digging deeper, not with accusations but with quiet precision. I accessed our shared cloud account, where she stored gallery schedules and travel plans. There it was, a trip to Paris, booked for next month, under the guise of an art acquisition. The itinerary included Julian, no mention of colleagues. My chest tightened as I pictured them strolling along the Seine, her laughter reserved for him. I cross-referenced her emails, finding confirmations for a boutique hotel, a single suite. The audacity of it stunned me. Her betrayal wasn't a fleeting lapse but a deliberate tapestry of lies. At work, I was distracted, my blueprints marred by errors. My colleague, Sarah, noticed my unease. "You okay, Dan? "You look like you're carrying the world." I brushed it off, but her concern lingered, a rare warmth in my unraveling life. I threw myself into routine, anchoring myself with numbers and steel, but evenings were torture. Clara would return late, her perfume faintly different, her stories about the gallery polished but hollow. I began tracking her phone's location, a betrayal of my own values, but necessity overrode guilt. She wasn't at the gallery some nights. She was at Julian's apartment, a trendy loft downtown. I met Julian once during this period, at a gallery fundraiser Clara insisted I attend. He was all charm, shaking my hand with a grip too firm, his eyes flickering with something. Guilt? Amusement? I wanted to crush his hand, to let him feel the weight of my rage, but I smiled instead, playing the oblivious husband. Clara hovered nearby, radiant in a sapphire dress, her arm brushing his as they discussed a painting. The room spun, but I held my ground, memorizing every detail. His smirk, her ease, the way they existed in a bubble I couldn't pierce. My nights were sleepless, spent researching Julian. He was 32, a rising star in the art world, with a trail of accolades and a reputation for charisma. Social media revealed his life. Gallery openings, late-night bars, and subtle posts hinting at a muse. Clara. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was public, a performance for their circle. I felt like a fool, a supporting character in their story. But fools can be dangerous when they stop playing the part. I began sketching my revenge, not in anger but in cold clarity. It wouldn't be petty, like exposing them at a gallery event. No, it would be surgical, dismantling their world as they dismantled mine. I considered their vulnerabilities. Julian's ambition, Clara's need for admiration. I'd use their own desires against them, crafting a trap so elegant they'd never see it coming. For now, I maintained the facade, my love for Clara a ghost I mourned daily. The bridge of our marriage was crumbling, but I'd ensure they fell with it. The deeper I dug, the heavier the truth became, like wet concrete setting around my heart. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was excavating a betrayal so intricate it felt like Clara had been living a double life. I installed a discreet app on her phone, one that mirrored her messages to a secure server. I hated myself for it, for crossing lines I'd once deemed sacred. But love doesn't survive on ideals alone. The messages poured in, a torrent of affection between her and Julian. "You're my escape," she wrote. "Daniel's so predictable." Predictable. The word stung. A blade twisted into my pride. I began tailing her, blending into the city's rhythm. One night, I followed her to Julian's loft, parking across the street. Through the window, I saw their silhouettes, close, laughing, her hand on his arm. It wasn't the intimacy that broke me. It was the ease, the way she belonged there. I drove home, hands shaking, and poured a whiskey, the burn grounding me. I wasn't a drinker, but I needed something to dull the edges. The next day, I hired a private investigator, a grizzled man named Victor who spoke in clipped sentences. "You sure you want this?" he asked. I nodded. I needed undeniable proof, not for a confrontation but for my plan. Victor was thorough, delivering photos within a week. Clara and Julian at a cafe, her head on his shoulder, them entering his loft, her overnight bag in hand. A stolen moment in an alley, their lips meeting. Each image was a hammer, shattering the illusion of my marriage. Victor also uncovered financial trails. Clara had used our joint account to fund their Paris trip, labeling it gallery expenses. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't just betraying me emotionally. She was siphoning our shared resources for her new life. I started noticing changes in myself. My patience, once a hallmark, frayed. At work, I snapped at a junior engineer over a minor error. Sarah, ever perceptive, pulled me aside. "Dan, talk to me. You're not you." I wanted to confess, to unload the weight, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I leaned into my role at home, cooking Clara's favorite meals, asking about her day, all while my mind churned with strategy. She seemed pleased, mistaking my attention for devotion. It was a performance, and I was a master. Julian's life became my obsession. I learned his routines, his connections, his weaknesses. He was arrogant, posting about his inspiration on X, thinly veiled references to Clara. I saved every post, building a dossier. His career hinged on a major upcoming exhibit, one Clara was curating. It was their stage, their triumph. I saw my opening. Revenge wouldn't be loud. It would be a quiet dismantling of their dreams, using the very platform they cherished. Clara noticed my distance one night, her hand on mine. "You okay, Dan? You seem off." I looked into her eyes, searching for the woman I'd loved, but found only a stranger. "Just work?" I lied, squeezing her hand. She bought it, her relief palpable. I wasn't ready to tip my hand. The bridge of our marriage was rigged with explosives, and I held the detonator. Soon, they'd feel the collapse, and I'd ensure it was merciless. Revenge, I learned, is an art form, requiring patience and precision, like designing a bridge meant to endure centuries. I wasn't driven by rage anymore. That fire had cooled into something sharper, more dangerous. I wanted Clara and Julian to unravel, not by my hand but by their own. My plan took shape, a lattice of consequences they'd never see coming. I began by studying the art world, a realm I'd once dismissed as Clara's domain. It was a house of cards, built on reputation, trust, and fragile egos, perfect for demolition. Julian's exhibit was the key, titled Ephemeral Light. It was his career-defining moment, a showcase of sculptures that critics were already buzzing about. Clara had staked her reputation on it, securing funding and high-profile collectors. I attended a gallery preview, blending into the crowd, my presence unremarkable to Clara, who was too busy fawning over Julian. The sculptures were striking, illuminated by delicate beams, but I noticed something. The materials looked substandard, the welds uneven. A structural engineer's eye never lies. I filed that away, a crack in their foundation. I contacted Victor again, this time for a different task. "Dig into Julian's suppliers," I said, "and the gallery's finances." Victor raised an eyebrow but complied. Within days, he uncovered irregularities. Julian had cut corners, using cheaper materials to pocket the difference, while Clara had inflated budgets to funnel money, some to their Paris escapades, some to Julian's personal account. It was sloppy, a trail of greed. I had my leverage, but I needed more. I wanted their betrayal to be their undoing, not just mine. I began planting seeds. Using an anonymous account on X, I posted subtle questions about the exhibit's authenticity, hinting at concerns from an insider. The art community, ever paranoid, took the bait. Whispers spread. Collectors grew cautious. I didn't need to lie. The truth was damning enough. Meanwhile, I befriended a journalist, Elena, who covered the art scene. Over coffee, I fed her tidbits, never mentioning Clara or Julian directly, just enough to pique her curiosity. "Check the gallery's books," I suggested. "Might be a story there." Elena's eyes lit up. She smelled blood. At home, I kept up the charade, but Clara was fraying. She'd snap over small things, her phone glued to her hand. Julian's name came up less, replaced by stress about the exhibit. "It's make or break," she confessed one night, her voice trembling. I nodded, feigning sympathy, while inside, I marveled at the irony. She was building her own cage and I was locking the door. I wondered if she sensed the shift, if she felt the ground trembling beneath her perfect life. My dreams were vivid now, not of bridges but of ruins. Clara and Julian standing in the wreckage of their ambitions, realizing too late what they'd lost. I wasn't a monster, I told myself. I was justice balancing the scales. But late at night, staring at the ceiling, I questioned my own heart. Was I avenging my pain or becoming something worse? The answer didn't matter. The plan was in motion, and I wouldn't stop until their world was ash. The exhibit was weeks away, and with it my chance to pull the final lever. The exhibit loomed like a storm cloud, and I could feel the air growing heavy with anticipation. Not theirs, but mine. Clara was a whirlwind, consumed by preparations, her nights spent at the gallery or, I knew, with Julian. I didn't follow her anymore. I didn't need to. Victor's reports were enough, detailing their meetings, their arguments. The pressure was cracking their bubble, and I hadn't even played my full hand. I was a ghost in their story, orchestrating chaos from the shadows, and it felt strangely empowering. I deepened my sabotage. Using my anonymous X account, I escalated the rumors, posting about shoddy craftsmanship in Julian's work, citing industry concerns. I leaked photos Victor had taken of the sculpture's weak points. Nothing overt, just enough to fuel doubt. The art world's elite, ever fickle, began pulling back. 2 major collectors postponed their purchases, citing quality issues. Clara mentioned it one night, her voice tight. "People are talking, Dan. It's ridiculous." I murmured support, my face a mask, while my mind calculated the next move. Elena, the journalist, was relentless. She dug into the gallery's finances, uncovering the inflated budgets and questionable transfers. I met her for lunch, playing the concerned citizen. "I heard rumors," I said, "about funds being misused." She scribbled furiously, her ambition a perfect tool. I knew her article would drop days before the exhibit, a bombshell timed for maximum impact. Clara and Julian would be blindsided, their reputations teetering. But I wasn't done. I wanted their betrayal to be personal, not just professional. I started reaching out to Julian's inner circle, posing as a gallery insider on encrypted forums. I dropped hints about his muse, suggesting Clara was using him for her own gain. It wasn't true, but doubt is a virus. His friends, already wary of his rapid rise, began questioning his loyalty. I saw the fallout on X, cryptic posts from his confidants, hinting at betrayal. The irony was delicious. I was turning their affair into a weapon against them, letting paranoia do the work. At home, Clara was unraveling. She'd lost weight, her eyes shadowed. One night, she broke down, sobbing about the exhibit's troubles. "It's falling apart, Dan. Everything I've worked for." I held her, my arms awry, and whispered reassurances. Guilt flickered, but I smothered it. She'd chosen this path, not me. I thought of the Paris trip, the stolen moments, the life she'd built without me. My resolve hardened. She'd feel the full weight of her choices soon. I finalized my plan for the exhibit's opening night. It wouldn't be a public spectacle, that was too crude. Instead, I'd expose their lies in a way that cut deeper, using their own world against them. I'd ensure Clara and Julian faced not just professional ruin but the shattering of their bond, forced to confront the emptiness of their affair. The bridge of my marriage was gone, reduced to rubble, but I'd build a new one from their wreckage. The opening was days away, and I was ready to pull the pin. The days before the exhibit felt like the hush before a bridge buckles. Silent, but charged with inevitable ruin. I moved through my life with mechanical precision, my engineering work a refuge where numbers still obeyed. Clara, meanwhile, was a shadow of herself, her confidence eroded by the whispers I'd seeded. She'd come home late, her face drawn, muttering about ungrateful collectors and baseless rumors. I'd nod, pour her wine, and ask gentle questions, each word a brick in the wall I was building around her. She never suspected I was the architect of her unraveling. Victor, my investigator, delivered a final report. Julian was cracking under pressure. He'd been seen arguing with suppliers, his charm replaced by desperation. The sculptures, Victor confirmed, were indeed substandard. Julian had gambled on cutting costs, assuming no one would notice. I smiled, not out of joy but satisfaction. A bridge fails when its weakest points are stressed, and I was applying pressure to every fault line in their world. I asked Victor to dig into Julian's past, sensing there was more to exploit. "On it," he grunted, his professionalism a comfort in my spiraling reality. I escalated my online campaign, using my anonymous X account to post cryptic warnings. Ephemeral light? More like fleeting trust. Ask about the welds. The art community was abuzz, critics now openly questioning Julian's integrity. Clara tried to counter the narrative, hosting a press preview, but I ensured Elena's article was timed perfectly. Titled "Shadows on the Canvas," Financial questions haunt local gallery. It didn't name Clara or Julian directly, but pointed to mismanagement and personal entanglements. I watched Clara read it on her tablet, her hands trembling, and felt a pang. Not guilt, but the ghost of love I'd buried. At work, Sarah noticed my detachment again. "Dan, you're scaring me," she said, her eyes searching mine. I wanted to tell her to share the weight, but I couldn't risk it. Instead, I leaned into my plan, contacting a rival curator, Marcus, under a false name. I fed him intel about Julian's shortcuts, framing it as concern for the industry. Marcus, ambitious and ruthless, was eager to undermine a competitor. "I'll look into it," he promised, his voice dripping with intent. I knew he'd spread the word, tightening the noose. Clara's desperation grew palpable. One night, she clung to me, her voice fragile. "Dan, what if it all falls apart?" I held her, my heart a locked vault, and lied. "You'll get through this." Her vulnerability was real, but so was her betrayal. I thought of Julian's loft, her laughter in his arms, the Paris suite funded by our savings. My resolve sharpened. The exhibit was tomorrow, and I was ready to watch their world fracture. I finalized my move for the opening, a quiet, devastating strike. It wouldn't be loud accusations or public shaming. Instead, I'd let their own lies collide, exposing their affair and their greed in a way that left no escape. I'd engineered their downfall with the same care I'd once used to build bridges, and tomorrow I'd trigger the collapse. The thought kept me awake, not with doubt, but with the cold clarity of purpose. The gallery glowed like a beacon as I arrived at the exhibit's opening. A sea of tailored suits and champagne flutes. Clara was radiant in a silver gown, playing the perfect curator, but her eyes betrayed her, darting, haunted. Julian, in a velvet blazer, worked the crowd, his smile strained. I blended in, just another guest, my presence unremarkable to them. The sculptures loomed, their lights casting eerie shadows, and I noted the welds again, visibly shoddy under scrutiny. My pulse was steady, my plan a machine now running on its own. I'd ensured key players were here. Marcus, the rival curator, mingling with collectors. Elena, her notebook in hand, sniffing for the story's next chapter. And a few of Julian's former allies, seated with doubts about his loyalty. I'd also tipped off a materials inspector, posing as a concerned buyer, suggesting a safety check on the sculptures. The stage was set, but I wasn't here to watch chaos unfold. I was here to detonate it with precision. Clara spotted me, her smile faltering. "Dan, you came," she said, kissing my cheek, her touch a hollow echo. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, my voice warm, my eyes cold. She didn't notice, too consumed by her crumbling empire. Julian approached, shaking my hand, his grip weaker than before. "Good to see you, Daniel," he said, and I nodded, savoring the irony. He had no idea I was the storm bearing down. I excused myself, circling the room, listening as whispers grew louder. Collectors questioning costs, critics eyeing the sculpture's flaws. Then it happened. Marcus, loud enough to draw attention, asked Julian about the materials. "Heard you went budget on these." "True." The room hushed, heads turning. Julian stammered, his charm failing. Clara stepped in, deflecting, but the damage was done. I saw Elena scribbling, her eyes alight. The inspector arrived mid-conversation, clipboard in hand, requesting a routine check. Panic flickered across Julian's face, and Clara's composure cracked, her voice sharp as she argued jurisdiction. The crowd murmured, sensing scandal. I didn't need to do more. The dominoes were falling, but I wanted them to feel the personal weight. I'd prepared a final touch, an anonymous email sent to key attendees during the event, with screenshots of Clara and Julian's messages, their Paris plans, and bank transfers. I'd blurred just enough to avoid legal trouble, but left no doubt about their affair and financial games. Phones buzzed, eyes widened, and I watched Clara's face as she checked her email, her hand flying to her mouth. Julian, beside her, froze, his phone lighting up with the same message. They locked eyes, Not in love but in terror, realizing their private world was exposed. I stood across the room, sipping champagne, my heart a furnace of cold triumph. The exhibit wasn't just failing, it was imploding, taking their reputations with it. But I wasn't done. This was only the first tremor. The true revenge, the cruelest part, was still to come, a blade I'd sharpen with their own regrets. I left quietly, the gallery's chaos a symphony behind me, knowing tomorrow would bring the next phase. The morning after the exhibit, I woke to silence in our home, Clara still at the gallery, likely salvaging what she could. I made coffee, the ritual grounding me as I reviewed the night's fallout on X. The art world was ablaze. Posts about ephemeral light's collapse, Julian's shoddy work, and veiled references to a curator's indiscretions. Elena's follow-up article was already trending, detailing financial irregularities with damning precision. My anonymous email had done its job. Collectors were pulling out, sponsors distancing themselves. Clara and Julian were pariahs, their names tied to scandal. I felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction, like finishing a complex blueprint. The personal blow, the affair's exposure, had hit harder than I'd expected. Clara's messages to Julian, now circulating, painted her as the instigator, a detail I'd ensured was clear. I wanted her to bear the weight, to feel the eyes of her peers judging her choices. Julian, too, was reeling, his ex-account silent, his allies ghosting him. I'd fractured their bond, planting seeds of mistrust, and now they were turning on each other. Clara returned at noon, her eyes red, her voice hoarse. "It's a disaster, Dan," she said, collapsing onto the couch. "Everything's ruined." I sat beside her, playing the supportive husband, my hand on hers. "What happened?" I asked, knowing every detail. She rambled about the inspector, the rumors, the email, her voice breaking as she mentioned lies about her and Julian. I nodded, my face a mask, while inside, I marveled at her denial. She still thought she could salvage us, oblivious to the fact that I was the storm. I pushed forward with the next phase. I'd learned from Victor that Julian had a history of bending rules. Small cons in his early career, buried but not erased. I fed this to Marcus, who was now openly gunning for Julian's spot in the art world. "Thought you should know," I wrote anonymously, attaching records. Marcus wouldn't hesitate to leak it, ensuring Julian's past became his present. For Clara, I targeted her pride. I contacted a former mentor of hers, a revered curator named Lillian, posing as a concerned colleague. I shared just enough about the scandal to prompt Lillian to call Clara, offering guidance that would feel like judgment. Clara's phone rang that afternoon. "Lillian." I watched her take the call, her face crumpling as she listened. She hung up, tears streaming, and I offered a tissue, my voice soft. "You'll rebuild," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. Rebuilding was my domain, not hers. I was dismantling her world piece by piece, ensuring every step forward would feel like quicksand. Julian, I knew, was facing similar pressures, his dreams of stardom now a fading echo. That night, alone, I questioned my path. Was this justice or obsession? The Clara I'd loved was gone, replaced by someone who'd chosen another life. Yet, her pain stirred something in me. Not pity, but a reminder of my own loss. I pushed it aside. The revenge wasn't complete. I needed them to confront not just their ruin but the emptiness of their choices, a truth sharper than any scandal. The final pieces were falling into place, and I was ready to tighten the screws. Clara barely left the house now, her world shrinking to our living room, where she scrolled X obsessively, tracking the fallout. The gallery had suspended her, pending an audit, and Julian's exhibit was officially cancelled, the sculptures deemed unsafe. I watched her unravel, her confidence replaced by a fragility I'd never seen. Part of me wanted to stop, to spare her, but then I'd remember her messages. Daniel's so predictable, and my resolve hardened. She'd built a life without me, and now she'd live in its wreckage. Julian was imploding faster. Victor reported he'd moved out of his loft, unable to afford it after sponsors pulled funding. His past cons, now public thanks to Marcus, had sealed his fate. No gallery would touch him. I'd ensured his friends doubted him, too, leaking texts suggesting he'd badmouthed them to Clara. On X, his former allies posted vague betrayals, calling him disloyal. I turned his charisma, his greatest asset, into a liability. He and Clara were texting less, their messages curt, laced with blame. My plan to fracture their bond was working. They were each other's poison now. I met Elena again, feeding her a final nugget. A tip about Clara's role in approving Julian's budgets. Knowing it would deepen the audit. This could be big, Elena said, her ambition a perfect cog in my machine. I felt a twinge of unease. Her career was thriving on my pain, but I needed her reach. The article would hit soon, cementing Clara's professional exile. I also reached out to Lillian again, suggesting Clara needed tough love to face her mistakes. Lillian's influence would cut deeper than any rumor, a mentor's disapproval more crushing than a headline. At home, Clara was a ghost, her eyes vacant. "I don't know who's doing this," she whispered one night, her voice raw. "Someone hates me." I took her hand, my heart a locked box. "You're stronger than this?" I lied, knowing she wasn't. I'd engineered her isolation, ensuring every door she knocked on would stay closed. Julian, I learned, was drinking heavily, his ex-posts erratic before he went silent. I pictured him alone, his dreams shattered, and felt a cold thrill. Their affair had been their escape, but I'd made it their prison. I began planning the final act, something personal, not just professional. I wanted them to face each other, to see the lies they'd built their bond on. I drafted a letter, and signed, to Julian, hinting Clara had leaked his past to save herself. To Clara, I'd suggest Julian had thrown her under the bus to dodge the audit. Neither was true, but truth didn't matter, doubt did. I'd deliver them at the right moment, letting their mistrust ignite. Late at night, Sarah called, worried. "Dan, you're disappearing. Talk to me." Her voice was a lifeline, but I couldn't take it, not yet. I was too deep, my revenge a bridge I had to cross alone. Clara slept beside me, her breathing uneven, and I stared at the ceiling, mapping the endgame. The letters would be my final lever, pulling their world apart not with a bang but a whisper. I was ready to finish what I'd started. I crafted the letters with care, each word a scalpel. To Julian, I wrote as a concerned insider, claiming Clara had tipped off the press about his past to deflect blame, attaching forged emails that looked convincing. To Clara, I posed as a gallery source, suggesting Julian had implicated her in the budget fraud to save himself, including fake texts that mirrored his style. I used burner accounts, untraceable, and mailed them from different cities, ensuring no link to me. Doubt was my weapon, and I wielded it with an engineer's precision. I sent the letters on a Monday, knowing they'd arrive midweek, when Clara and Julian were at their breaking points. Clara was barely functioning, her phone silent, her ex-account dormant. The audit had escalated, with investigators now questioning her directly. Julian, Victor reported, was crashing with a friend, his career in ashes. Their messages, once frequent, had stopped entirely, the silence a testament to my earlier seeds of mistrust. I waited, patient as a predator, for the letters to land. On Wednesday, I saw the shift. Clara was pacing, her phone clutched tightly, her face a storm of betrayal. She didn't tell me. She never did anymore. But I knew the letter had hit. Julian, I learned through Victor, had stormed out of his friend's place, ranting about disloyalty. My forgeries had worked, each believing the other had turned traitor. I pictured them, alone, their affair's warmth replaced by suspicion, and felt a grim triumph. I'd stripped them of their refuge, leaving only mirrors reflecting their flaws. I kept up my role at home, cooking dinner, asking about her day, my voice steady. Clara barely responded, her mind elsewhere. "I trusted the wrong people," she muttered once, and I nodded, hiding my satisfaction. The audit's final report was due soon, and Elena's next article loomed, both nails in their professional coffins. But the letters were personal, a twist of the knife. I wanted them to confront each other, to let their pain erupt, and I'd ensure it happened publicly, where their shame would echo. I arranged the final stage, a meeting. Using another burner account, I messaged Julian, posing as Clara, asking to meet at a quiet cafe to clear the air. To Clara, I sent a similar message, mimicking Julian's tone, suggesting he wanted closure. I set the time and place for Friday, a neutral spot where their collision would be raw, unguarded. I'd be there, not to interfere but to witness, to see the bridge of their bond collapse under the weight of my design. That night, Clara cried herself to sleep, and I lay awake, my plan a constellation in my mind. I thought of Sarah's concern, of the life I'd once had with Clara, now a distant blueprint. Revenge had reshaped me, but I didn't care. I was building something new, not a bridge but a monument to their betrayal, one that would stand long after they'd fallen. Friday was coming, and with it, the moment I'd tear their world apart for good. Friday arrived, crisp and gray, the city humming unaware of the drama I'd orchestrated. The cafe, a cozy spot with exposed brick and soft jazz, was the perfect stage, intimate enough for raw emotion, public enough for witnesses. I arrived early, claiming a corner table, my face half hidden by a newspaper. Clara entered first, her coat clutched tightly, her eyes scanning nervously. She looked brittle, like a sculpture one tap from shattering. Julian followed minutes later, his jaw tight, his usual swagger gone. They saw each other, froze, and I leaned back, my heart a metronome of cold anticipation. Clara spoke first, her voice low but sharp. "You asked me here, Julian. After everything." He frowned, confused. "Me? You texted me." The realization hit them simultaneously. Someone had set them up. Their eyes darted, searching for the culprit. But I was invisible, just another patron. The letters had done their work. Mistrust crackled between them like static. Clara accused him of leaking her name to the auditors, her voice rising. Julian shot back, claiming she'd exposed his past to save herself. The cafe's hum faded, heads turning as their argument swelled. It was mesmerizing, like watching a bridge collapse in slow motion. Clara's hands shook, her words venomous. "You used me, Julian. This was always about your career." He laughed, bitter. "You chased the thrill, Clara. Don't blame me for your crumbling marriage." The mention of our marriage was a jolt. I gripped my coffee, steadying myself. They were tearing each other apart, their affair's illusion shredded by my design. Customers whispered, phones discreetly recording, the moment already rippling outward. I planned this, but the rawness surprised me. Clara's tears, Julian's clenched fists. They weren't just losing each other. They were losing themselves. I'd wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, and now they did, publicly, irrevocably. Clara stood, her chair scraping, and hissed, "We're done." Julian didn't chase her. He just sat, head in hands, as she stormed out. I waited, letting the scene settle, then left quietly, my work here complete. The cafe's warmth faded behind me, replaced by the city's chill, mirroring my soul. Back home, Clara wasn't there. I checked X. Clips of their fight were already circulating, tagged with #ArtScandal. My anonymous account posted one last nudge. When trust breaks, so does the art. The comments exploded, sealing their disgrace. I felt no joy, only a hollow triumph. The revenge was working, but it wasn't enough. I needed Clara to face me, to see the man she'd underestimated. The final act wasn't about her and Julian anymore. It was about us, the bridge we'd built and burned. I poured a whiskey, staring at our wedding photo on the mantel. Clara's smile in it was a ghost, a reminder of what I'd lost. Tomorrow, I'd confront her, not with anger but with truth, the cruelest weapon of all. My plan had dismantled their world, but I wanted her to know I'd been the architect, to carry that knowledge forever. The end was near, and I was ready to lay the final beam. Clara returned late, her eyes hollow, her movements sluggish. She didn't speak, just sank onto the couch, staring at nothing. I watched her, my heart a locked vault, and decided it was time. The cafe had broken her bond with Julian, but I needed to break her illusion of our marriage. I'd spent months playing the devoted husband, hiding my pain, but the mask was heavy, and I was ready to shed it. I sat across from her, my voice steady, deliberate, like laying out a blueprint. "Clara," I began, "we need to talk." She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten I existed. I didn't accuse her outright. I didn't need to. Instead, I recounted the months I'd watched her drift, the late nights, the Paris plans. Her face paled, her hands twisting in her lap. "I found your messages," I said, pausing to let it sink in. "To Julian. All of them." Her breath caught, and I saw the moment she realized there was no escape. She stammered, "Dan, but I raised a hand, silencing her. "I know everything," I continued. "The hotel, the money from our account, the way you laughed at me being predictable." That word hit her like a slap. She flinched, tears welling. I didn't stop. I described the exhibit's collapse, the rumors, the audit, letting her think I'd only watched, not orchestrated. But then I leaned closer, my voice low. "You thought I'd never notice, Clara. You thought I was just the engineer, too busy with bridges to see you building a new life." Her sob broke the silence, raw, desperate. I could have stopped there, let her guilt consume her, but cruelty was my promise. "I didn't just find out," I said. "I made sure everyone else did too." Her eyes widened, confusion giving way to horror as I described the anonymous posts, the tips to Elena, the letters that tore her and Julian apart. "You didn't just betray me," I said. "You underestimated me." She shook her head, whispering, "No, Dan, why?" I stood, towering over her. "Because you stole my world, Clara. I rebuilt it my way." She collapsed, sobbing, begging for forgiveness, but I felt nothing. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by the stranger who'd gambled our life for a fleeting thrill. I didn't yell, I didn't need to. My calm was sharper, cutting deeper than any outburst. "You'll carry this," I said. "Not just the scandal, but knowing I saw through you." I walked away, leaving her crumpled, the weight of my words her new prison. That night, I slept in the guest room, the house too quiet. I dreamed of bridges, not collapsing but standing firm, built from my pain. Clara's ruin was complete, but Julian's lingered. I'd deal with him next, ensuring his exile was permanent. Revenge wasn't over, it was evolving, a structure I'd perfect until they both understood the cost of crossing me. Julian was my final loose end, a man who'd thought he could waltz into my life and take what was mine. Victor tracked him to a dive bar downtown, where he was drowning his failures in cheap liquor. I didn't need to see him to know he was broken. X told the story. No posts, no followers, just silence from a man who'd lived for applause. But silence wasn't enough. I wanted him to feel the void Clara now felt, to know his dreams were dust because of me. I used my network, reaching out to a contact in the art world, a gallery owner named Tessa who owed me a favor from a past project. I didn't mention Julian directly, just shared concerns about his reliability, his past cons, his role in the scandal. Tessa was sharp, connected, and discreet. "I'll make sure the right people know," she said. By week's end, Julian's name was poison. Even small galleries wouldn't touch him. I'd ensured his exile wasn't temporary. He'd never sculpt again, never charm his way back. I considered confronting him, but that was too direct, too merciful. Instead, I sent one last letter, and signed, to his friend's address where he was crashing. "You thought Clara was your muse," I wrote, "but she was your downfall, and someone saw it all." I included a photo from the cafe, their fight captured mid-scream, a reminder of his humiliation. I wanted it to haunt him, to make him question every choice, every glance he'd shared with Clara. Doubt was my gift to him, a shadow he'd carry forever. Victor confirmed Julian received it. He'd torn it up, ranting, but the damage was done. He left the city days later, no forwarding address, no prospects. I pictured him in some nowhere town, sketching in a notebook no one would see, his talent wasted, his ego crushed. It wasn't violence, it was erasure, a fate crueler for someone like him. I'd stripped him of his stage, leaving him to perform for ghosts. Clara, meanwhile, was withdrawing further. She'd stopped checking X, stopped answering calls. The audit's findings were public now, confirming her mismanagement, and the gallery fired her permanently. She moved through our house like a specter, avoiding my eyes. I didn't taunt her, that would have been crude. My presence was enough, a reminder of her miscalculation. I began packing, not to leave but to reclaim my space, boxing her art books, her trinkets, signaling the end without words. I met Sarah for coffee, needing an anchor. "You look lighter," she said, and I realized she was right. Revenge had been my blueprint, and I'd built it flawlessly. Julian was gone, Clara was hollow, and I was free. Not happy, but unburdened. The final step was letting Clara go, not with forgiveness but with indifference, the cruelest cut of all. I was ready to walk away, my bridge rebuilt on my terms. Clara and I hadn't spoken since my confession, the air between us thick with unspoken truths. I decided it was time to end the charade, not our marriage, which was already ash, but the pretense of coexistence. I found her in the kitchen, staring at a cold cup of tea, her face a map of regret. "We're done," I said, not harshly but firmly, like setting a final beam. She looked up, no tears this time, just a weary nod. She knew resistance was futile. I laid out my terms, clinical as a contract. I'd keep the house. She'd drained our savings, so it was only fair. She could take her clothes, her art, nothing else. I'd file for divorce, uncontested, and she'd sign without a fight. "I don't deserve you," she whispered, and I almost laughed. Deserve? This wasn't about worth, it was about consequences. "You chose this," I said, and walked away, leaving her to pack. She moved slowly, like someone dismantling their own life, and I felt nothing, not even pity. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel who saw through Clara's facade in minutes. "She won't fight," Rachel assured me, and she was right. Clara signed the papers within days, her signature shaky but final. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Her world was rubble. No job, no Julian, no reputation. She'd rented a tiny apartment downtown, a far cry from our home, and I heard through Victor she was applying for clerical jobs, her curating days over. My revenge had clipped her wings, and she'd never fly again. I turned my focus inward, redecorating the house, erasing Clara's touches. I painted the walls slate gray, replaced her abstract art with minimalist prints, made the space mine. Sarah helped, her presence a quiet comfort. "You're rebuilding," she said, and I nodded. Not just the house, but me. I started running again, my body remembering strength, my mind clearing. Clara's betrayal had been a fault line, but I'd reinforced my foundation, stronger than before. On X, the scandal faded, replaced by new dramas, but Clara and Julian remained untouchable, their names synonymous with failure. I checked Julian's status one last time. Victor found him in a small town, working as a bartender, his hands no longer shaping art but pouring drinks. It was fitting, a quiet end for a loud man. I deleted my anonymous account, severing my last tie to their ruin. My work was done. I stood in my new living room, the silence clean, purposeful. Clara was gone, Julian was nothing, and I was whole. Not the man I'd been, but someone sharper, forged in pain. Revenge hadn't healed me, but it had freed me, a bridge to a life I'd define alone. I poured a whiskey, raised a glass to the empty room, and smiled for the first time in months. Months passed, and the world moved on, but I carried the lessons of Clara's betrayal like blueprints I'd never discard. I threw myself into work, designing bridges with a precision that earned me a promotion. My colleagues noticed the change. Sarah called it quiet fire, a strength born from surviving collapse. She and I grew closer, not romantically but as allies, her friendship a reminder that trust could exist again, carefully rebuilt. I didn't tell her about my revenge. It was mine, a private monument, its weight balanced by my new clarity. Clara surfaced once, A brief email apologizing, asking to meet. I didn't respond. She'd live with her choices, just as I lived with mine. Victor, ever thorough, sent a final update. She was working as a receptionist. Her spark dimmed, her life small. I felt no guilt. She'd gambled our marriage and lost. Julian, he said, had vanished deeper into obscurity. No trace of art in his world. Their ruin was complete, not with violence but with absence. A void I'd carved with surgical care. I traveled for a project, standing on a bridge I'd designed, its arches soaring over a river. It was solid, unyielding, a testament to my skill and survival. I thought of Clara's gallery, Julian's sculptures, both crumbled under scrutiny, and realized I'd built something they never could: resilience. My revenge wasn't just their downfall. It was my ascent, a life reclaimed from their lies. I didn't need their pain anymore. It was ballast I'd shed. I started sketching again. Not bridges but abstract forms. A nod to Clara's world I'd once dismissed. It wasn't for her, it was for me, a way to blend logic and chaos, to understand the art in destruction and creation. I showed one to Sarah, who smiled. "It's you," she said, and she was right. I was no longer just the engineer, nor the avenger. I was Daniel, whole, undefined by betrayal. On X, I posted a photo of my bridge, captioned, "Built to last." No one knew its deeper meaning, but it didn't matter. The likes rolled in, a quiet affirmation. I scrolled past art posts, scandals, lives unfolding, and felt detached, free. Clara and Julian were ghosts. Their story ended, while mine stretched forward, a horizon I'd shape alone. I walked home under a clear sky, the city alive around me. My house was mine now, no echoes of Clara, no shadows of Julian. I opened the door, the silence welcoming, and knew I'd crossed my final bridge. Revenge had been my tool, but living well was my triumph. I'd dismantled their world, not to destroy but to rebuild, and in that act, I'd found something sharper than vengeance: myself.